It's me. I am going live with an Ask Me Anything session, and it looks like we're live, or at least I think we are. So, anyways, I wanted to hop on for a while just to answer questions. So, whoever you are, if you have questions about anything related to DevSecOps, cloud, building a DevSecOps or cloud company, I don't know, managing hundreds of engineers or anything of that nature, or even just anything about our companies, so Cloud Underground, Underground Ops, or anything really. And if you're someone who's been following me for a while and you're just wondering what's going on and what I'm up to, then those questions are welcome too. So, first, I want to announce that we are having our first annual hackathon. We've had like workshops in the past, like big little live events and things like that, but we've never fully gotten around to having our own complete annual conference. So this year is our first annual conference, virtual conference with GitLab. I'm proud to announce that basically with our hackathon, folks are going to be using the Zero Trust Cockpit, which I'll get into some details. We built a number of products. Our main product is called the Underground Nexus. It is basically a copy-paste data center is what it is. So that's a little bit of a confusing concept to talk about. But anyways, let me just temporarily shrink my face and I'll just at a high level kind of show what is happening here. If you check out our website at cloudunderground.dev, then there is this GitLab and Cloud Underground live hackathon. So if you go to learn more, this is something that you can check out. If you're wondering where you can find more details, you can look at my profile to find our website on LinkedIn, or you can just go to cloudunderground.dev as shown here in super tiny text. Is the website that we host everything at. But for anyone who's trying to get into DevSecOps, or maybe you're trying to learn more about GitLab, and maybe you're trying to learn more about automated governance and all of these types of things, then we are hosting on June 24th an official kickoff, basically at noon Mountain Standard Time, where we're going to just get together and basically hack some stuff ethically, mind you. We created this thing called the Zero Trust Cockpit app. Why Zero Trust? Because I wanted to give everyone as much freedom as possible to be able to, do development without a whole lot of restrictions. And so we've created something where to participate in the hackathon, you get to self-host your resources so that you have no limits to your hackery because it's your hardware and your resources. But we provide the app so that you can go to town to make something hopefully pretty darn cool or amazing. So anyways, this being our first conference, this is not my first conference. I actually I come from conference management before starting tech companies. I used to host huge conference events, like hundreds of people, things for like surgeons' birthdays or something. It was the type of thing, or someone might be like a rocket scientist who's doing some huge event for tons of people to celebrate, or like some celebrity or something like that. So I used to host and help serve at really big, fancy events with tons and tons of people. So that's something that I've never really returned to, but we're getting there because now we are going to host our own conference. Depending on how this year's virtual conference goes, we actually did get a venue for future years. So, if we're getting some attendance and people are having a great time, we are working toward expanding our funding so that we can have a venue hosted event next year. Same thing, hackathon, but can hack in person with next year's hackathon. DevSecOps, we use DevSecOps so that there's not so much risk, so that people can just learn and have fun and do whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So since I've kind of been ranting for a little bit, let me go ahead and just get into some common questions, and then I will also pull up my chats so that I'm making sure that I'm following whatever questions anyone's asking, since I haven't answered any questions just yet. So let me just go ahead and pull up questions for our Ask Me Anything session. So I do have a question that I get asked often, is why do we make our software free and open source, and why does that not make it harder for us to run a company, or harder for us to establish, income, cash flow, and all of those different things? Believe it or not, making software open source doesn't mean that the business makes no money. I think that's an interesting conception, because people are like, well, you can't make money selling open source software. Well, we don't actually sell software. We create open source. Well, we sell, how do I explain it? We sell educational software and any software that's teaching you something or entertaining someone. But in terms of if software is a tool, like tools, so this thing that you're seeing in the background is called the Underground Nexus, and this is basically a greatest hits of data center tools that I had to use over the past 20 years to basically build data centers, but it's completely hyper converged, completely containerized, and completely cloud native, so that the kinds of things that you might do in a data center in the year 2010, you can do on your desk. It's a thing now. So we are in 2020, and one thing that I want to emphasize is that with us being in 2023 rather, technology does get faster, more advanced, and we see things like giant servers getting more and more powerful. So that means that something that was like a server in 2010 that could host an entire company, and still could host an entire company with that much power, is now like the size of a credit card, or just much smaller. So we originally got into like manufacturing. So what we did is we built hardware systems basically, and configured them the same way that, say, a 2010 server could be configured. So this is the power of some 2010 servers in a rack right here, where you can run a company off of these. We actually have a company running off of 3 of these little boxes, all by itself, and it doesn't cost that much. When you're using a lot of these newer modern innovations, you can start ditching really expensive hosting bills. So what we did is we just automated what in the past was manual labor to otherwise build an entire data center, so that something like this, initially this didn't have an operating system, or you'd have to go and manually configure this like a data center to start using it as a business. So what we did is we hyper converged all of that into software, so that you can paste this whole configuration here to run as many servers as you want, regardless of, works with Docker. So if it's compatible with Docker or Kubernetes, we use Docker or Kubernetes. A lot of things are compatible with Docker or Kubernetes, and that's what this runs with. So anyways, we open source our resources because I just don't find so it's complicated when you're building and selling software. You have to have funds and resources to protect your software in certain ways. But if you open source your software, you can actually focus more on putting your budget toward engineers. And I see it more as I can put my money into licenses, or I can put my money into people. And if I put my money into people, I can almost always guarantee that the capabilities of my business are going to improve. If I'm putting my money into licenses and AWS and Azure and all these other things, then my ability to have access to capabilities and engineers goes down. It's not to say that there aren't times when it makes sense to have licensed software. We do sell some licensed software, but we don't sell licensed tools. The tools we don't license. We open source software tools, and we only really have closed source if it's, I guess, yeah, it's basically just like a little cloud. That's a good way to put it. So But yeah, just if you have engineers, you can do a lot more than if you just have, okay, great, I have a license for some software. Now who's gonna use the software license? Okay, great. And then let's say that you start hiring more engineers. Now you have to have money for more licensing and more engineers. So I like to get rid of all that. So I like to trash that and say, just put your money into your people, provide better services, and make everything people oriented. I think that making software as people oriented as possible goes a long way, even if upfront it costs a lot of money to find ways to drive the cost of your software resources down. So anyways, it's a pretty common question I get, is why do we open source everything? Because it allows us to help a lot more people too. So another one is, we teach people, and for our small team to support, say, maybe 100,000 or even just like 10,000 users in an environment, it's really hard to support 10,000 users when people have budget limits where they're like, well, we have 10,000 users, but we only have this much budget, and we need to get something that's going to help our people start working with all of our stuff. So whenever we sell with enterprises, we include a person who supports the team of, say, 1,000 people or 10,000 people, instead of just being like, here's some software with some videos that you're paying for. It might cost about the same, but the difference between how I like to approach things is give your enterprise clients a customer. Give your enterprise clients not just like not a customer, I mean an engineer. Give them an engineer with everything. So the way we do everything is scrap the license. Everything we provide comes with an engineer. That's really confusing maybe, but it's not. So basically, if you buy something from us, it comes with an engineer in some way, someone you can talk to, someone you can ask questions to, because software doesn't train you by itself. So then that's another thing right there is, okay, so now if you're paying for software licenses, now you also have to pay for training, and you have to do all these other things. So it's just much more straightforward when you don't have all these extra bills, all these other things to track, all these limitations for people who you want to even learn the stuff. So if you're trying to have access to a talent pool anywhere in society, in any society, if you make it really hard for your talent pool to afford the resources to learn how to help you, we just made the resources free, so people don't have to figure out how to afford to learn how to work with us. Anyone can learn how to work with us for free, and the stuff that we do is stuff that you see in big enterprise companies, because I come from big enterprise companies, and I don't know, when you've done things like work on a $5 million deployment and things like that, you don't just like magically forget all of these things that you've did 100 times. So yeah, we just kind of do a lot of the same old, and just replace license costs with people, because people tend to be more helpful than the cost of a license. Now, what I will say is some companies, when you buy a license, you are paying for like their team. So that's something to be mindful of, because not every company who sells software, usually if you're paying, there's probably like a support desk or a help desk. But there are companies who are just like, you're just going to get the software and you're paying for this part, and if you want anything that's more than the software, then you better get ready to pony up who knows what. And with enterprise businesses, it's like millions of dollars. It's not like, it'll be $10 more. No, it'll be like $10 million more. So another thing that we're doing, a question that I get a lot, is what is drop squads? So one of the things that we've been building alongside tools and new software platforms and all kinds of stuff is we started creating what's called a drop squad business model. So the drop squad business model is a managed service provider business model that works a little bit like Airbnb, but instead of it working quite like Airbnb, you, instead of renting rooms out to people, you rent compute out that you're hosting for people. So then you kind of become a miniature AWS. That's all drop squads is. If you decide that you ever want to join any of our weird programs, we do have like just free resources for people who want to build and run consultancies. So if you're trying to run a consultancy, it just kind of goes back to, it doesn't cost you a thing to come learn with us and use any of our tools. And then if you just start hacking away at our tools and taking stuff out of it and changing it, great. One thing that's very different about what we do that confuses a lot of folks that when they're not used to what we do, we're probably one of the only software development platforms where we encourage you to just rip what we make apart and turn it into your own and turn it into a completely different asset. That freaks a lot of other business owners out with their software platforms. They'll probably try to sue you or something like that, but we don't work that way. We actually made our open source software partly open source so that there are no limitations to you going and ripping something out and putting your own thing in and plucking this thing out. And so if you are, quote unquote, stealing our Underground Nexus, that's actually how it was designed to be, because it is open and you're not stealing. That's what it was intended to be used for. So you can, the Underground Nexus is what's referred to in the engineering world as a golden image. If you've been doing engineering for a while, you might have heard of a golden image. If you have not been doing engineering for a while, a golden image is basically an image that says that this is the most perfect or complete version of something that you do. And so our golden images are all built around governance and security and compliance. So we have a belief that you can do your governance, compliance, and security and shift it all left and bake it all into the beginning of the development process, where by the time one of our little software factories deploys, it's mostly NIST compliant, where you do have to go through like a NIST checklist and then true up things like you got to change all the defaults. You got to decide if you want to use all the applications that are in here. I keep opening a new Firefox tab when I have one open. So anyways, if anyone has spent any time with the Underground Nexus, then you've probably seen that it's basically a little cloud native operating system. It's based on Debian Ubuntu, and then it runs most of its dedicated services in a containerized way. So what that's called is it's called a Phoenix server, which means that each and every core element of the server is destructible. So if there's a service you don't like, you can destroy it. You can just rip it out. You can be like, So this is how the Underground Nexus is really supposed to be used. You come in here and you say, I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this, and I don't want to configure all of these things manually by myself, and I don't want to reinvent any wheels, and I want to basically have the equivalent of 2 years worth of data center configurations already done without me being the one who's doing all those configurations. So basically, if you were to use our tools and then come in here and start changing everything and then make your own images from it, that's exactly what we made it for. We made it so that you can just skip a lot of work, where a lot of people teach you how to build things from ground up. We kind of took the opposite approach, where let's just give you the template of the thing that's been built from ground up already, because I've had to do it for tons of companies. And when you've done the same compliance configurations for years, and I've been doing the same compliance configuration since before 2010, think about that. So since before 2010, I've had to help companies meet the same compliance regulations that for the most part are still the same. And every time I went to a new company, I had to start that journey all over again to be like, okay, so I built this for another company, now I'm going to start building it all over again for another company. And then you go on to the next one and on to the next one, and then eventually you start to burn out on it, and you're like, I'm building 2 years worth of data center configurations and then moving on to the next for a decade plus. So when that happens, for us, we decided that that's boring. And we decided that if we don't want to do it anymore, why would anyone else want to continue to do this very slow thing? And you can just skip the development process and just go straight to having something that's there. And then a golden image, by having this thing that's pre-built, now you have a template that is in a working state where you can go and see what are the configurations supposed to look like. Great. Grab the ones that you want, put them where you want. What's this supposed to look like? And maybe can I, does this tool work like this? Does this tool look like how, what do the different tools look like, or whatever you're trying to do when you're building cloud native software or whatever. So it also makes it really easy to start testing things when you don't have to build your test environment every time. So that's another thing. So if you've ever been a software engineer, half the time you go to a company, and then instead of them just giving you a thing that builds itself, that lets you do 100% of your testing, 100% of your dev, and then you can't accidentally cause the company to like have an unexpected billing spike where they're like, whoa, you did something that caused us to have like a unexpected billing spike, and then they lay you off over it. I've seen that a lot. I've only been a victim to that like once I've worked with a lot of companies in the past, but it's common enough where they're just like, whoa, me as the business owner did not think about how I can make sure that you doing your job doesn't suddenly make me unable to afford you. Now, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like, if you have all these extra fees and expenses and costs for your developers to do their job, or let's say that you're a developer and your developers have to go and build their own little development environments all the time, that's just going to slow your business down. That's going to cost more money. That's going to cause confusion. It's going to increase your turnover rates. That's going to cause all kinds of complicated things. It's not so straightforward. But anyways, it's good stuff. So catch up with the chats. So yeah, and then this some good comments about Raspberry Pis, and why did we start using resources like single boards, Raspberry Pis, and why do we do most of our development on lower powered devices? Because you can run our software platform on AWS. You can also run it on a super beefy system, which I'm actually running it on right now. So the one that you're seeing right here, I'll show you. It's most certainly not a Raspberry Pi, but we can take a look at or at least I thought I had the monitoring configured. Oh, I do. So, oh, that's the wrong one. Hold on, I'm pulling up something because I'm going to show you that the tools we make work on. Maybe I didn't set up that thing. I'll mess with that another day when it's alive and running. Or actually, give me a moment. You're gonna watch me poke at something on this thing for 2 seconds. It's gonna be worth it, I promise. Here, just so if anyone's wondering what I'm doing. So if you're using the Underground Nexus, it has a bunch of dedicated services, and sometimes you can turn them on and off. And so let's say that you're trying to save resources. Right now, I turned off the monitoring stack because this is a demo environment. And we have some videos that kind of talk about how to use Portainer. I'll make some better trainings on how this works sometime. But you can see that there's some items that are turned off. So I'm just going to show you. So the reason why we like using small boards is you can start development on a small system and then migrate to a really powerful system when you have like the final version of how something's supposed to run. So that's how we do things. One of the other reasons behind that is, let's say that you are trying to teach a lot of people or work with a lot of people who have like low income or might not have a lot of resources. It's really hard for beginners, and not just beginners, but people who just don't have a lot of like funds. And it's pretty common that people don't have the kinds of funds to buy a whole bunch of really expensive servers. So having low powered, low cost devices, it's easy on the energy bill, and it's also easy on just the bill to develop, because you don't need to spend $10,000 to build a software application. One thing I want people to be well aware of is spending $10,000 just to start a software application. If you have the money, that's great, but for those who don't have the money, it doesn't mean that you can't do the things that people who have way more funds than you can. I think that's one thing that I really want to kind of help drive home with folks is, what if you don't have excessive funds or lots of resources to get into computer science, and go to some fancy school and use like I don't know, cyber ranges, and I don't know. It's really expensive to get a not just cybersecurity, but just computer science degree in general. It costs a lot of money. And then if you're trying to use AWS and things like that, it can be affordable in bursts. But if you start trying to prototype with AWS, then suddenly, if you're not budgeting a couple $100 a month, or a couple, maybe sometimes $1,000 a month, it's really easy to spend $400 a month on AWS when you could just use this, something like a little Raspberry Pi or something along those lines. So let's take a look at if this thing loads to... There we go. So one thing that we care about is if you build something, it should work on everything. Is kind of like, in terms of like software, it's valuable to have software that's compatible with more than one device. And so nowadays there are like M1 Macs that people like to develop on. They have the same architecture as, say, like a Raspberry Pi. Then you have more conventional Apple computers, which is confusing because Apple computers have two different chip types, and if you're not a developer and you're getting into it for the first time, that can be very confusing. Or if the tools aren't available for the kind of work that you do, I don't know. But anyways, the stuff that we make, we try to make it compatible with everything. So anyways, the idea is that you can start with what you can afford, and by the time you start earning some money as a business owner, it's really hard to get off the ground as a business owner, but eventually you do end up with money, and then it's really convenient to be able to scale your stuff up, based on what you can afford. Everyone has to start somewhere, and this thing's seeing if it's doing I should have preloaded this or something. But anyways, I'm just talking about some basic things, I suppose. I'll let that load. As you can see, I had the stuff all turned off, so I'm turning it back on. I was trying to not create performance issues while running my stream. So if the stream starts getting choppy or something along those lines, then that's probably why, because I'm messing with all of the services on this thing. So anyways, this is a software factory, so there it goes. Now it's starting to load up stuff. So this thing is capable of monitoring itself, and right now it's just sitting there caching a bunch of logs and data that it takes a while to revive itself. But it's, yeah, anyways, we don't need to watch this for now. I'll let you play around with some of these things, but mostly I guess the thing I was trying to show is that you can scale up when you start cheap, and then you can save your money for when you are ready to spend money on more expensive hardware. So anyways, that kind of goes over most of the questions that I've seen. And then if anyone else has a question, then feel free to ask anytime or send a comment, and then I'll probably do another one of these soon and kind of get back into things. I do need to get back into doing some content work. I've been making some changes to, I guess, my role. One of the things, so I work for a company called Cloud Underground, and historically I've been the CSO, so the Chief Science Officer. So the science behind the architectures that the Underground Nexus uses, it can all be learned in the DevSecOps Dojo. And the DevSecOps Dojo now is basically where you can learn how to build cloud from ground up. On our website, you can just go to cloudunderground.dev, and you'll find under the Underground Nexus that you can join the DevSecOps Dojo, which you can't really see very well behind me. But I'm always there, and my focus these days is to help people who are coming into the community learn how to monetize their projects. That's the big one. We get a lot of business owners who are either new business owners or they've been doing things for a while, and maybe they're really good on one side of business and trying to pick up different skills on the other side of business. And then also for people who are trying to meet other business owners and people who build resources and things like that. The DevSecOps Dojo is a great place to just connect with other professionals who are just in it, people who are trying to figure out how to pay the bills for their systems and building their bare metal and hiring their first engineers and completing their first MVP and getting their first round of funding, things like that. So once upon a time, I was that person who was getting started with things. Things are a little different now, so now I'm helping others who are in that state. So I won't be doing as much engineering as I used to do. Now I'm going to be a lot more focused on, if you want to be a part of our community, we run a Discord community and it's free to join. You can join anytime. Basically, you're welcome to just come in, ask questions, see what other people are doing that works for them. And then a lot of folks in the engineering space come in just for a job too, not necessarily to start a business. So if you're trying to learn different ways to get like a particularly advanced job, maybe in the sciences, then that can be an interesting thing, especially if computer science is your thing. But yeah, so we have some stuff coming up. Thanks for watching. And if you're trying to build things, so that's a good question. Where can you find this? So to find the tools, before I get off of here, if you go to our website at cloudunderground.dev, then we do have a GitHub, but the easiest way to find the GitHub is to just go to the Underground Nexus drop down on our website, and then there's this free download option, and that just goes over to the GitHub. Well, I guess if you go through there, it has a little sign up. You can actually skip this and go straight to GitHub. So if you just Google Underground Nexus, it should be the first thing that ranks these days because our SEO is pretty good. So if you Google it, you can kind of bypass that and not sign up the thing. So it's kind of up to you, but there are some goodies in the link. So if you sign up through here, this gives you a number of other links as well. So let me see if I can just say, I can't access via LinkedIn that way. I don't know, put in something, email, or I don't know, it should accept this person. That should be fine. Yeah. So anyways, in here, if you do use this, it has other links. It has a link to the bare metal version of the Underground Nexus, which, as this shows here, that the quick start guide is available in the DevSecOps Dojo. So the reason why we do that is because the Underground Nexus OS is it's a data center operating system, and if you're not familiar with working with data center technologies, it can be very confusing. So anyone who's trying to use the bare metal operating system flavor of the Underground Nexus, then it probably makes sense to just join the community and ask for help. But the container is really easy to use. The container is so straightforward to use that it's really just a copy paste. So I'll just scroll down a little bit and go to find the thing. So it has install steps. So install step 1, it's really just 2 steps. It has an install, so you choose what works with your hardware. So if you're using, say, an M1 Mac or a Raspberry Pi, you will want to use one of the ARM images here. If you want to then use, say, a more standard laptop that's not like an M1 Mac or a Raspberry Pi, then use one of these AMD 64 installs. And the difference between the secure and development versions is that the secure version, you can't use it as a DNS server, and then you can't use it as a NAS by default, so it locks all of that so that like people outside of your little server can't get into your little Nexus firewall. So there's a little firewall that blocks people on that. Alternatively, the development version will allow you to use your Underground Nexus software factory right away once it's activated as a DNS server and a NAS. So you can start just storing, I don't know, you could put a movie library in it if you wanted to, or save engineering resources in it. That's what I use it mostly for. If I'm saving, say, like Ubuntu or Windows images that I use for engineering, anything I use for like virtual machines. And then it has the second step. The second step really is just use this default activate string, and that will get it activating itself, which it is slow. Keep in mind that it's a whole software factory, so it's quite the resource, and so you will feel it. It'll take like a good hour, but then once it's done, it just works. And then yes, it works great with old resources. Old laptops or old desktops make amazing software factory resources. So if you're trying to find a good use for old hardware, that's a great thing you can do. So if you have old hardware laying around and you want to have an entire data center from, say, a really old laptop that you're not using, or just some old desktop that you're not using, or someone else's really old hardware that they're like, I'm not using this anymore, you want this piece of machine, there you go. Then that just makes for an outstanding way to just very quickly have something that you can use it to secure your whole home, by the way. So if you have a router, then you can network the development version of the Underground Nexus with a router, and then tell that router that that's its DNS server, and it'll block ads across your entire network, and that includes adware based malware and any adware launched ransomware, things like that. So that goes back to the DevSecOps side of things. So the minute you decide to make it a DNS server for a network, it just starts blocking stuff. It has block lists. It can annoy people because if people like ads, I don't know many people who like ads, but every now and then you'll be someone like, this link isn't working. And then you ask them like, well, what's this link that's not working? And then you look at it and they're like really wanting to click some ad. That'll happen. And they'll be like, I want to click this ad. And we're like, why do you want to click that ad? Why do you want to give, I don't know why people want to click ads. It's up to them. They can click those ads if they want. But you can, I like to block ads. I don't like ads. It's great. So yeah, it's a great thing to use to just start a software factory or build a portfolio, or really even build a smart home. I think honestly my favorite use case for home use is, if you've never heard of Home Assistant, let me just show you. I'll just Google it. Home. So it's just called Home Assistant. It's the first thing that you're going to see if you Google it. And you can toss this thing inside of your Underground Nexus software factory, and you can pretty much just start building a smart home. Building a smart home is a fun time. So we have a smart home, and you can set up things where you can talk to whatever you design with your smart home. Home Assistant, you can go so far as to automate not just lights, but like air conditioning ducts and vents. So if you've ever heard of well, let's just go to YouTube briefly. And I'll show you. So just look up Linus Tech Tips Home Assistant, and that's going to take you. So this is actually really entertaining. You can do some silly things, and it's pretty fun to watch other people doing silly things with their super technical environments. Now the difference between building, say, like Home Assistant in, anyways, I'll let you watch that video. You can see here, it's just look up Linus Tech Tips Home Assistant. That's good enough. We'll leave it with that pretty much. So anyways, thanks for asking questions. Thanks for checking things out. And then I will just check one more time to see if anyone else has any questions before I hop off here. Oh yeah, so just more folks who want to try out working with the old systems. Yes, it is a great thing to do. It's really fun. So anyways, because it's open source, like, hack away at it. And also, I really want to emphasize, because I get this question, this is a question I really didn't spend enough time on, so I'll just say it again. The Underground Nexus, it really is open source. I think that people think that I'm like trying to sell it to them. I get nothing if you use the Underground Nexus. As a matter of fact, I don't even know if you got the Underground Nexus or not. For all I know, I don't even have to know who you are. You just start using this thing, and all it really is 2 years worth of data center configurations for security and compliance, and you can put it in your home and basically have like enterprise grade stuff in a house, which doesn't necessarily make sense for folks, but you don't have to spend time building it because it builds itself. And if you're trying to work in the sciences, then all of a sudden that has value. So if you want to work in a data center, you want to work in cybersecurity, or you want to work in a SOC, or any of these things like that, then having your own lab environment makes a huge difference. I can't emphasize that enough. Sometime I'll go back and reconfigure this thing so that we have data in this, because I did not throw data into this, but it's pretty interesting when it works. Actually, I wonder if I have one that is working. I'll mess with one more thing before I stop messing with things and I'll give up. I just want to check. I want to try one more thing. And if I didn't set it up before recording, then I'll just come back and do another video going over it sometime. So it just kind of goes to things that you don't configure, don't necessarily just do stuff. So the Underground Nexus, I have different ones. The nice thing about them is it's really easy to have a lot of them because they build themselves. So this one I've been setting up for SIM. So this is Wazoo and Elasticsearch based, but this isn't, the SIM is not what I'm trying to show you. I'm trying to show you, so this one's actually been all set up for demo and stuff like that. So I'm just pulling up a better way to show you what some of the stuff that we've put in here by default. There is predefined monitoring so that you don't have to build monitoring, and it's in the one that there's so much stuff in here these days. But the Underground Nexus's foundation, this is the whole foundation. There's not going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of refinement to the Underground Nexus, but we're not adding more like default resources. Here we go. So by default, here we go. As you can see, this one has it's got 8 cores. The one I was trying to show you, it has like 64 cores or something like that, and like 64 gigs of RAM. But the Underground Nexus, it'll run on just about anything. This thing has 8 gigs of RAM, and it has 16 gigs of RAM and 8 cores, and then it'll show you everything that's going on in here, so you can scroll down and see what the different CPU usage amounts are for all the different services. So you can see right here that the Workbench is the busiest service, and the Workbench is the desktop that you're looking at, so that makes a lot of sense. And it shows all kinds of stuff, like you can find out how much data is moving through the different resources. So this shows us that we have more data transferring through the Workbench once again, which makes a lot of sense because that's the desktop that we're on. So it's fun to mess with. I don't know. You can set up alerts, you can set up alarms, and then because it does have like SIM resources, if you use a SIM, you can integrate SIM resources with it. It has a default SIM. You can rip that out too. You can rip everything out if you don't like it. The default SIM that's pre-configured, you can actually just go into the settings of this thing. I built SIM for most of my career, so if anyone's wondering why I'm suddenly talking about monitoring and SIMs, I spent so much of my days, like a decade, working on like monitoring technologies and creating different monitoring technologies. So that's just something that's just probably forever baked into what I do. Here we go. So if we go to this one that says Elasticsearch, Elasticsearch is what I spent the most time with in my career in terms of monitoring. I used to monitor like dark sites, huge like enterprise environments, things like that. So Elasticsearch, it has this option to explore, and basically there hasn't been an event. If you have a recent event, it'll show data, or I guess I could tell it to look further back in time. Let's look back a few days. It's been running for a while, so I don't know what's sending into the data. But anyways, it's worth playing with. You can go and configure little dashboards, and you can go and find, I don't know, you can find attacks being launched at your system, and you can monitor the security of a home or an office or whatever you're trying to do. So, and it's just all baked into it, pre-configured, pre-built, so that you don't have to know how to build a sim. So you can build a sim by just pasting this now. So I was like, what if I turn all of my old jobs into a single copy paste? And so that's what we've done. So if I've done it over the past like total 20 years of my like development days, then this whole thing has all of my like greatest hits of things that I had to do, just all packaged into one single auto build copy paste, so that you don't even have to build it all from scratch yourself. So anyways, thanks for all the questions, and thanks for checking out what we've been working on, and I will be back talking about more things at some point. As I mentioned earlier, my title's shifting from Chief Science Officer to Chief Finance Officer. So I do have a dedicated goal and interest in trying to help people figure out how to basically grow your businesses. And one thing that I'm into is, how do you increase the margins of what you're trying to do? If you're not a business owner, the stuff we do, you can still learn what business owners do. So what do people do with businesses, and what do business owners use, and why do business owners have to have that stuff? And so while I don't necessarily focus on the beginner market like I used to, it's still the information that if you are a beginner, you can get a sneak peek into what people do when they're running cloud and security companies and things. So anyways, have fun. Don't have too much fun. Sign up for our hackathon and start building some stuff. If you want to learn more about the Zero Trust Cockpit, on our website, since the hackathon uses the Zero Trust Cockpit, you can check out this package anytime. The Zero Trust Cockpit is free if you join the DevSecOps Dojo. Otherwise, it's only $25 or $24. The reason why is we want to encourage people to talk to each other, and so it's kind of like a little reward to come join the DevSecOps Dojo, where you can talk to people, meet other professionals, and then it's free, and you get more out of it if you get this the free way. Or if you're just trying to use this and you don't want to deal with Discord and stuff, it's only $24. Anyways, that is our Cloud Jutsu program. The thing about the Cloud Jutsu program is it also goes over the first 3 years of how we built the Underground Nexus. And the way that we built the Underground Nexus was by hosting just like weekly training sessions, and then every week I'd teach people how to build a thing, and then we would package that thing, and then that would be the next thing that's being automated into the stack. Then next week we'd teach the next thing, and then now all of those videos are in the Cloud Jutsu course, and then the Underground Nexus is the end result of all that work. So you can actually see us building the Underground Nexus by joining the Cloud Jutsu program. So one of the reasons why we did that is when we started Cloud Underground in 2020, was I wanted people to be able to see what it's like to start something new and see what the early versions look like. And you can see all the old iterations of what became Underground Nexus. One of the earlier iterations of it was called the Life Vault, and before that it has what's called the Olympiad stack living inside of it, which is where we really started from one of my other companies. Nosha Point got hit really hard with chip shortages, but chip shortages are ending, so Nosha Point can kind of revive soon. Because I'm a business owner, I'm going to start talking about things like that, like how do you make sure that your supply chain doesn't get completely wrecked, because that's kind of what happened to one of my other companies. And now, because of shortages, like resource shortages, it's kind of like, if anyone knows, like chips, like GPUs and things like Raspberry Pis, for a while a Raspberry Pi was super hard to get, and then other chips that are related, same kind of thing, and then all of a sudden it's really hard to provide services. So we partly started changing what we do to solve that problem for us, and now we teach other companies how to solve that same problem, so that you don't have these huge supply chain nightmares that just ruin your ability to have a customer base and run your company, things like that. because it's a thing and it happens. And then when you're the one who funded it all, it really sucks. But that's okay, because there are ways to solve financial problems. There's always a way to solve financial problems, even if it means building the solution that didn't exist from scratch, from ground up, with your own hands, with an entire community that you also built from ground up for 3 years and packaged it into autonomous